So we were thinking we'd close it off by talking about the future and keep it kind of low key. And we have a bunch of thoughts of our own that we've compiled, and also we want to open it up to you guys. I never thought I'd say it, but we want to hear your pony requests. The time will be limited, though, so.
I think I'm needs to be on.
Do you need to hit the dealio under there?
We'll trade batteries.
Cool.
Okay. Batteries. I think that one of the things I saw this on the schedule. I put this on the schedule months ago, and then I saw it on the schedule yesterday and went, you know, what in the world are we going to talk about? Because I think if there's one overarching theme of Django, it's that we never set out to build a framework, and we're still not really trying to build a framework. Right. We're trying to get shit done. And that makes planning for the future a little bit weird, because who really knows what's going to happen in the future? And when I feel like our main role is to listen to what users of Django are trying to do and help make sure that that is easy. So if we were to just say, oh, let's do this, and this is the plan, and go, we would be doing a lot of people, including ourselves, a big disservice. So I think that's why we wanted to keep this really low-key and not very formal, because this is all, in the end, our opinion, and we have and do disagree, and we have been, both of us, wrong before when we've argued with our user community. In fact, as a general rule, I would say that if we want one thing and our user community in general wants another, they're probably right. So the big caveat, I think, here, for me at least, is that this really is just my opinion, not sort of, and it needs fleshing out, and it needs criticism and pushback.
Mm-hmm. So totally agreed about the whole development process with Django is what scratches our own itches. I think that's like the best open source software comes out of that. And that's a very nice segue, because I have a page full of itches here that I thought would be a nice starting point. So multiple delete in the admin. Super awesome. Can I get a hell yeah? All right, cool. Little background, just in terms of scratching the itches. I don't use the admin for my own work stuff anymore. For my everyblock.com thing, we don't use the admin. So I haven't been involved with admin stuff for a couple months, but I have started using the admin for my personal finances. It's a really great idea, just like a record for every bank transaction or whatever, and you can sort it by category and all that stuff. Anyway, so a couple of needs have come out of that. Multiple delete, but also beyond just delete, multiple editing of records. So I have a checkbox that once I've verified it on my bank's website, I can check it. Just like edit arbitrary fields in the change list would be super, super cool. And possible now with Newforms admin. Feel free to interrupt me.
That's like the one part of Newforms admin that isn't new and beautiful and wonderful, is actually the change list stuff. So I think that making that as cool as the rest of it should definitely be something we put some work into.
Yes. And Wilson, who works with me in the day job, is very excited about it.
And who designed the admin.
And yeah, the guy who designed it is excited about changing the design, partly out of tiredness of the same design which has been around for like 3 years, and partly because some of these new features are going to require a new design. So that's exciting too. Along the admin path, it'd be cool to let applications register widgets. So like you can have a little thing on your main admin page, send my email alerts out, or whatever that's defined in your admin class. It should be really easy to do.
Sort of hooking custom views in, except automatically wrapping them in the admin stuff and permissions and those sorts of things, yeah.
Right. So that'd be good. Beyond the admin stuff, multiple databases is just huge for me personally, so I would really like to see that. I know we have the plumbing, just we need to rat out the API. We need to decide on the API and just do it.
Yeah, I think both of us personally need multiple database
Right.
support, so I think that's a pretty good hint for what's going to be happening in Django pretty soon.
All right. Maybe, what about making this like we just sort of spew out things and then you clap if you like it and then you boo if you don't? Okay. Oh, all right, you like that? Cool. Integrate the admin with data browse. So now the question is, do we add admin functionality to data browse or do we add data browse functionality to the admin? And I would say the latter because we have like that. Be careful what you wish for.
Everyone's following Simon so far.
Because we have all the admin. I mean, obviously, we've invested a lot more into admin than into the data browse, which the data browse actually has kind of languished recently.
But the thing that data browse does do really well, that the admin is only sort of starting to catch up to, is sort of this concept of plugins. Like you can provide, someone was saying earlier, they have like a GIS plugin for data browse that lets you sort of browse geographic content in the same way you can browse date-based content in data browse. And the admin sort of has like one concept of like, lists and individual objects, and there's no other ways of browsing or finding data in the admin. So that idea, that feature of being able to like, hey, here's a way of sorting and filtering data and getting at it, that sort of any app can use. I'd love that.
We really ought to update the Django book for 1.0. Wait.
Man, the authors of that book are so lazy.
So that is something that maybe we should open up to the community, or?
Yeah, I mean, technically the book is, the book's under the free document license, so, anyone is free to do that, but that's different from actually. It turns out, at least as far as I'm concerned, that writing a book about something that you also work on is a really bad idea because you have to explain the parts that suck, and then you get distracted and you try to fix them, and then you have to go back and change your book, and it's kind of this self-fulfilling cycle, and a year and a half later, your publisher is wondering what the hell's going on. So I'm a bit actually turned off on the concept of writing a book at all, but maybe we can figure something out there.
What do you think of integrating the book into our Subversion? Oh, I guess the licenses aren't compatible, are they?
Yeah, they're not.
Okay.
But there is sort of a weird dichotomy between the book and the official documentation. So, my hope is that over time the documentation will get so good that the need to write a definitive book will disappear. I think there always will be room for books like the ones that James wrote, which sort of give you a more cross-sectional overview, because you can construct those cross-sections in so many different ways that we can't possibly cover that in official documentation. But I would hope that the sort of the definitive guide thing that we set out to do should be made obsolete by the documentation getting really kick-ass.
So this reminds me of a philosophy that I had way in the early days, which was applying DRY to documentation. So the first time a question is asked on the mailing list, add the answer to that question to the documentation. And we were pretty good about that at the very beginning, but now Django users has like 10,000 people. And so maybe it would be cool if a couple people in the community could volunteer to just look at the Django users mailing list and then take out whatever discussions aren't covered well enough by the documentation and make it a priority to make tickets, file tickets, and file patches against the docs to do that.
Yeah, our FAQ sucks.
Yeah, it's not an FAQ.
It's like questions that we wanted to answer. So that needs work.
There's another one on the wiki, the IRC
which is pretty good. Yeah.
By the way, our wiki is essentially a wasteland.
Yeah, it needs love. The other thing about documentation that I really want to do is there's been a lot of people who have started or have volunteered to start translating the documentation into other languages, and sort of the basics of that is available in the new doc system that I worked on, but we don't have any mechanisms for translators to do that. We don't have any place for them to put their translations, so that whole thing needs to be worked out. But over half the traffic to the Django project website comes from outside the US. And that's a very good sign that we need to clean up our act and be less insular in our attitude about, I mean, we have 400,000 lines of documentation, but if you don't speak English, it's zero. So we need to work on that.
So here's something that you and I talked about in the earlier break. And I think it's even your idea, so if you wrote it down, sorry for stealing it. What about combining some of the community sites out there? So if you have a Django people account and you have an account on Django snippets, and of course you have your track account on DjangoProject.com, maybe they're somehow all linked together, so OpenID. Exactly.
But more than just identity, we want to let people if you're James Bennett and you're a contributor to Django and you sort of a little bit, a sort of contributor, a minor contributor, a lesser contributor, let us say. And then you also post snippets on Django snippets, and then you've also got code that you've released separately on Google Code, and then you also have a profile on Django people, and then you've also got your personal site, and then you're also syndicating your personal site's feed into the Django aggregator. Each and every single one of those steps, there's a separate person who, James has to sign up for each of those sites. I have to personally add his feed to the aggregator. It breaks a lot. There's, just a lot of work on everyone's part to maintain that information. And then there's no one place that I can go and be like, hey, what's James up to these days? So it would be really neat if we could kind of have a sort of federation between all of these cool, socially sites built around the Django community to help us sort of stay tighter. And yeah, that'd be awesome.
Cool. So what's the next step with that? Talk to Simon have Simon explain OpenID to us. So that's all for my list.
I think part of the next step of that is just sort of starting to do it. So I mean, there was a really cool moment a while back in the Django chat room when Simon and Brian Rosner also runs the Django chat room logger bot, and Brian and Simon were like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if Django people knew when the last time you were in the IRC channel was? And Simon was like, well, why don't we just make that happen? So I think just there's more that we can just do about being like, hey, James, let's figure out a way to get everyone's a feed of everyone's snippets onto their profile on Django people. Hey, Brian, let's figure out a way to get everyone's pluggables syndicated in there as well. I mean, so we can just sort of start. We know all these people, so even if the individuals involved in those sites don't, we can make those introductions and get that ball rolling.
Go for it.
Okay, I have a bunch of crap written down here.
We haven't
So
heard any booze
I
yet,
had a couple of questions. Oh, what was that?
We haven't heard any booze yet.
Right. Well, so I had a couple of questions about. We had a couple of weird talks at this conference. We had one about why Cal hates Django. Although I was very gratified to learn that Cal hates us only slightly more than he hates everything, which is a huge compliment if you know Cal. So that's fantastic. And we also had a talk this morning from Mark about sort of the danger, Will Robinson, you might become Zope, which I don't think anybody wants. So yikes, even them. And I had this, I had a couple of questions like, it's kind of weird to have these, pretty critical certainly constructive, but still very critical talks. And that's one of the things that I like. I feel really strongly that criticism, even if hopefully constructive, but criticism should always be welcome, and we should always be willing to hear when and where we suck. And I know that that's hard because it goes against sort of the personal ego, and I think we have to constantly be encouraging people who disagree with us to say so and argue with us. And yeah, so my hope is that, as we continue to grow and as we continue to grow into our roles as, a large successful project, that we don't lose sight of the need to sort of constantly be questioning at every step of the way, like, are we doing the right thing here?
Right on.
So yeah, one of the big things that I'm really excited about is I think the 1.0 process has shown us that timed releases in open source tends to work really well. So I'm pretty sure that, assuming that when we propose this on Django Dev, there isn't a huge outcry of no, I think we're going to switch to timed releases going forward so that there's sort of a regular schedule of Django releases. Like I said, we'll propose it on the greater list. This is a good subset of our community, but definitely not even a majority of it. So, but yeah, that's something I'm gonna push for because I think it's cool. A lot of the content in Cal's talk focused on shortcomings in the ORM, and Mark mentioned as well a number of those things. And what I really took away from that was, there's all these features like, dirty tracking, identity mapper, multiple databases, support for non-relational databases. There's absolutely no question in my mind that those things ought to be possible, period. There is a question in my mind about which of them are appropriate to be part of Django / any general purpose framework and which of them aren't, but right now there are barriers in place to making it reasonable to do any of those things, and that's silly. Like, there shouldn't be any barriers there. It should be easy to do so that we can easily have the debate. So the debate of whether to include it is like, look, I have code. Is this gonna be part of Django? Is it gonna be something in contrib, or is it gonna be something external? Like, the debate shouldn't be, should we make this work? Because the answer to that is yes, I think, so. And then I have down at the bottom here one prediction for the future, which is I think that the continuing debate within our core, within the core developers, within our development community, within our user community, between us and the rest of the Python world and us and the rest of the web framework world, is going to be a continual sort of back and forth between sort of the philosophy of don't make me think, which helps people get started very, very quickly, and the philosophy of, let me choose, which helps advanced developers move past that wall you hit with any sort of rapid startup tool. I don't think that there's a right answer between those two. Those two things are always going to be opposed and always going to be pushing and pulling on them. But I just sort of wrote that down so that I would always be conscious of where we're setting that dial, and so that we can look at, how that works.
Mm-hmm. Is that it for your?
That's all I've written down.
Is it time for ponies? Simon
has stuff.
All right.
Is this the 3-page list, Simon? Because we haven't got all night. Yeah, why don't we just head over to the microphones and we can just start taking questions / feature requests / whatever.
And the clapping thing still applies, I think.
Boo!
Actually,
we have microphones.
We do have a solution for that. We put an init.py in Django contrib.ajax.
The question was, when will Ajax support be built into Django?
Django.contrib.ajax gets an under init, and when you import it, it raises import error. Go to jquery.com.
Hi. The pony that I would like, and I know I should get off my ass and make it myself because we now have new forms admin, would be default ordering in the admin. So I could define like an int field and just drag and drop them so the things are in a certain default order. Not a default order, but a user specified order they can change in the admin.
Wait,
He wants to be able to, sort of on the change list, reorder that list and have it sort of update in integer fields. We talked about this at PyCon, and we never, and we got into an enormous bike shed about the API and ended up dropping it entirely. This is why bike shedding is bad, seriously. So yeah, I want that too. I have a really, really nasty, hacky, gross solution to that. So it'd be nice to have an official one.
so it would be a model-wide order. So every record would just have a
Yeah, everything would get an int
Order.
attached
It'd be
to it.
sort of like the order with respect to thing,
Yeah,
right.
but like, you know,
Without respect.
better and not broken.
What's the audience feeling right now? Okay.
I just wanted to commend you on making the decision to do the timed 1.0 release. I definitely had some questions and doubts about it myself, and it ended up being the right decision. And I just say when you are encountering those issues with the community where there's no clear answer and people are divided, I'd encourage you to make those hard decisions in the future to just keep shit moving.
Thanks, man. The thing that really put me personally over the edge was coming to the realization that 1.0 isn't the end of the world. We just start working on 2.0, you know? Stupid, but it took me a while.
We should have that done in like a couple of months, right? I don't see, you know, there's only a couple of things.
I don't see
left.
what else we
Yeah.
have to do.
And we got a couple of things, but this shouldn't take very long.
What's the thinking on what versions of Python to support?
Oh, that's a really good question. So right now we're still 2.3 and up. I know you've talked about upping that to 2.4.
Yeah, I'd like to drop 2.3 support like now.
What?
The problem is though, the problem with doing that though is that although for everyone who applauded, dropping 2.3 support doesn't actually get you anything because you can still use a later version. It makes it easier for us to develop it, and it makes it a little bit easier for people to submit patches, although I clean up people's 2.3 support. The problem is the people who it hurts disproportionately. There are still large operating systems that are used widely in deployment that only have 2.3 available. And if you actually try to upgrade that, you'll actually break your system. And obviously that's not our fault, but so I don't know. I think more than likely now that we have a stable 1.0 release, we can kind of be like, look, if you need to upgrade, upgrade, you need to upgrade Python 2. And then of course there's Python 3 in the horizon. So at a certain point we're gonna have to make that leap, and deciding when to do that is gonna be, although Guido's given us like 5 years, so.
I'm totally on board with having a, Python 3 version.
Yeah, I mean, we'll probably propose it on the list, and if there's, if the people can give, really good reasons, hey, look, this, foo Linux, only provides 2.3 and it is used by, this huge number of people, yeah, then maybe not, but I think probably we'll drop 2.3, and we need to sort of gradually, in the run-up to 3.0, we need to sort of gradually drop support eventually for 2.4 and 2.5 at some point, so that we can run in that sort of hybrid 2.6 to 3 compatibility layer in preparation for that big jump over the wall. Hopefully we won't be, this will not be for quite a while, I think.
I have a pedantic question. What is the Django font, and where can we get it?
It's called DTL Procyon, P-R-O-K-Y-O-N, I believe. It's a Dutch type library font, and you can buy it. I believe it's about $100 per per face, and we use the regular and the bold or the heavy, whatever they call it, face.
Oh, thank you.
So how many do you want? I've got 2 pages. So the most
You get one like everyone else.
Yeah. For shame. In that case, I'll go for, I want Django to have the best debugging tools of any web framework. Like the stuff Cal was showing us, I want debug toolbars, SQL profilers, logging, warnings, the whole works.
This is one of these places where like everyone's got like a piece of that, and so if we all kind of come together and start hacking on it, it'll be awesome really quick.
He's really finished. He's just going back to the end of the line. I get it. I'm not quite sure. Have you guys made a decision on, have you settled on backward compatibility as a concrete thing? Because my impression before 1.0 was that was the real distinguishing feature. But my sense is that might be a dangerous restriction to apply if it's 1.0 until 2.0. Like that might force you to the next major version or something.
So we discussed this a fair amount in the run-up to 1.0 about what exactly backwards compatibility means. And I'll give the abbreviated version, but there's actually a document. If you look under miscellaneous on the documentation website, there's a document called API Stability. It's also linked from the 1.0 release notes. And that, first of all, describes in detail what APIs are considered stable, and second, it explains what stable means. In a nutshell, it means that, so we've got, let's say we've got some API that's in 1.0 that we decide we don't like, and we're going to get rid of it. In 1.1, we will provide a backwards, we'll provide for sort of a layer around the new API that is exactly the same as the old API, and that raises a warning. Silently raises a warning when you use it. In 1.2, that warning will become very loud, and it'll be like the max length warning that when we made that change. It'll spew all over your console, it'll annoy the crap out of you, so you'll fix it. And in 1.3, that API will be gone. So we have sort of and this is, by the way, Python's deprecation policy for the things that they remove. There are things that have been removed from the standard library in 2.6 that have been deprecated since 2.3. So this is basically what we'll do. There are some caveats, obviously. If there's a security problem, we're going to break backwards compatibility to fix the security problem. If it's completely unavoidable for some reason, we might have to break backwards compatibility, but we've always been guided by, this is why 1.0 took so long, because when we released it, we want to be like Python. And when I upgrade from Python 2.4 to Python 2.5, everything just works. And when you upgrade from Django 1.0 to Django 1.1, we want it to be the same way.
Yeah, so the idea is not just API that remains stable, but also functionality, with that exception with the security.
Right, I mean, there may be little things, error strings might change, that happens. Messages might change. We're not obviously going to stop adding new features to an API. That would just be silly, but we won't break the ones that you're relying on.
Okay, cool.
Right, to your second question of that somehow stifling the innovation, I would highly doubt that.
Yeah, cool.
I wouldn't want that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, Python's cool in that it's very easy to provide, all that max length stuff that's spewed all over your console. That was a kind of gross and hacky meta class, but it was very easy to stick that in there and just sort of provide that warning for free, basically, and automatically proxy it. And it was very easy for us to later remove that without causing us a huge amount of work. So it's pretty easy for as long as we're careful, it'll be easy for us to meet that goal.
Yep. Thanks.
Yeah, mine is a documentation request. Basically, in the documentation, it's my first application. What I think will help a lot with that sort of dip in the productivity that everyone hits is a my second application and a my third application, because everyone can deal with one model, everyone can deal with one view, and everyone can deal with all the sort of other elements that go with it. But when you start getting into things like well, I want to have URLs in my other application and URLs in this application. The including URLs is only ever dealt with really with the admin interface, and it's never really explained for doing it with your own. You have to kind of guess and try it and stuff like that. And you get a lot of like, why are there 2 slashes in my URLs when I only needed 1 and stuff like that. So definitely that would help a lot, as well as just indications where to draw the line. I found I was including too much stuff in a lot of my apps. Like I was trying to make them almost like controls or something like that, as opposed to just applications that focused on what they were supposed to do. So kind of things where you give clear indications with well-known applications, where lines were drawn, where views weren't done, where models weren't used, or things like that. That would help a lot in terms of the pain factor that I experienced when I had to write my first set of real applications that jibed with other ones in a single project.
Well, judging by feedback, maybe we should put a YouTube video of James's talk at the end of the tutorial.
Absolutely. Actually, a lot of the points that I saw in the talk were already available actually in a, not a screencast, but a set of slides. And this kind of extended them, and they look really good, and it was good to see them repeated as well. It would be great if there was actual code examples and things that went with it, because that's the main thing is it's sort of high-level theory, I guess you could say, and it'd be great to see down in the trenches code refactored from say a monolithic style to an application style, like to a granular style, I guess. And so far, there's no real documentation or tutorials out there that really explains the practical side of the thing. So definitely just, I guess, practical tutorials on a lot of that sort of stuff are critical.
Maybe like a book about practical Django projects.
I think I'll try and get it, but it's I found Django books are actually really hard to find, especially in Canada, in chapters and Indigo and stuff like that. So if anyone's been able to track those down, it'd be I'd like to know. Yeah, okay, Amazon, I guess.
The
Never
other,
heard of it. Sorry.
the big like bee in my bonnet right now is that there's this amazing community writing like that blog post about porting from old comments to new comments. Like that's what I should have written when I wrote the somewhat crappy document that I wrote instead. So the problem is, as a new user to Django, you don't know that the official documentation is not the be-all and end-all. You don't know that there's, you don't know that there's all these people out there writing cool stuff about it. So I want to do a better job of getting people who write that stuff, like taking that and bringing it into the official documentation and having that, because it's sort of the bloggers and the community people who are writing these sort of practical, cross-sectional, how-to type stuff that as someone really close to it, it's hard for us to see what the sort of high-level use cases are sometimes. So bringing that community stuff in and making my second Django app would be awesome.
Hey guys, what Cal said yesterday, I'd really like to, please take it to heart, because the stuff he was talking about was so dead on in terms of scalability and things like that. And along the same lines, in the documentation, the material on deployment and speedier deployment and things that you have, it would be really nice if there was more of it. Because when I deal with people and they say, well, we're not sure this will scale. It'll be really good if we can point them at a section that says, here are some case studies and here's and as far as that's concerned, sort of a marketing thing is we heard a whole bunch of people yesterday put out numbers, how many millions of users were hitting their instances, the curse site. It'd be great if those were put up somewhere so that we could point people and say, look, it scales, it can go. Because I get pushback sometimes, and they go, well, we should do Rails. I'm like, nah. So it'd be helpful. Thanks.
I want to listen to what Cal has to say, but my wife won't let me grow a beard.
So one pony I really want to see come in really soon is to come in with aggregation or maybe shortly after it would be some kind of calculation field that you can define on a model and define that it's a calculation based on other fields or related fields.
Denormalization.
Yeah, Cal mentioned that yesterday, the denormalized
Yeah.
fields thing, and I had like a head-slapping forehead thing because that's so easy,
Right.
and it's ridiculous that we haven't.
But not just
I haven't-
denormalizing, just specifically for doing denormalizing, but doing any calculation you could do with aggregates.
Exactly.
Or it would also take care of the auto now and auto add now fields and stuff like that. Would be And if I could say one more, I would really love to be able to pass more than one argument to a template filter without using comma delimited strings. That might be touchy, I don't know, but it would be useful. Thanks.
Actually, mine fits really nicely with what he was just saying, which is, I know we need a way in Satchmo using new forms admin to present non-editable fields in the admin.
Yes.
And
Please.
Jag has written a really great widget he's about to submit, but it needs some changes to get it to work in core.
Yeah, he described it to me yesterday, and it sounds perfect.
Clap. You should clap.
What, you again?
Yep, less boilerplate in views. Right now, for models, you do from Django.db import models, and that's great. And from URLs, you import star, which is a bit dodgy, but that's okay. But in views, you end up with 10 lines of imports. Right now, after 5 years of working with Django, we know what people are going to need in their views. So it'd be great if we could do from Django import common view things or something, or just do one import. Like, I don't know the name, but one import, and from that, you've got that, like DJ. dj.render, dj.loadTemplate, dj.http404, all of the common things in one nice little thing that you can import, and that's all of your view imports for 90% of your cases.
I think that's what we meant shortcuts to be, and then we put like 2 things in it. Right?
Yeah, so better
Great.
shortcuts.
I mean, technically it is shortcuts, but only technically.
Yeah. Go on, applause.
Ooh,
Is somebody, wait, who doesn't like that?
Just a consistency thing? Everything in one place?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we wouldn't redefine stuff, but so having like a dozen imports in your views doesn't bug you. Yeah, but come on, I bet you copy and paste them into each new file.
Yeah.
My general rule of thumb is that once I break out the copy paste, I start feeling a bit uncomfortable.
Template tag namespaces.
Ooh.
Word.
There's already an implementation of this in Track, I think.
That's going to be, unfortunately, really hard to do without breaking backwards compatibility.
I think it's the way it's in Track is it's optional. So you can still refer to it without the namespace.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, cool.
So probably something only useful for people hacking on Django itself, but I'd love to see benchmarks in the test suite.
I was just thinking about this. There's PyStones. We need like a Django stone so that we can know as we make changes. We need a holistic benchmark so that as we make changes, we can know what the sort of overall effect on Django as a whole is. There's plenty of people who have tried to compare Django speed to other web frameworks, and I don't really care, but I do care about how Django compares to the previous version of Django, and that's something we need to get pretty serious about. And by the way, Django Stones is a terrible name, so if someone can come up with something better, please let me know.
Better related field widgets in the admin. If you ever have more than X number of foreign key relations, then that's just going to kill your select widget in the drop down in the admin.
And raw ID admin is just.
So I have my own app for this, but I'd really like to have at least an option to have something better than raw ID, because raw is just too raw.
Right. Like an autocomplete kind of thing, perhaps.
I'll show you what I have then.
Okay.
That's one of those like sub 100 tickets that's still open. Really, really old stuff.
It would be awesome if writing more complex template tags was easier than it is right now. I know that there's some libraries out there that tried to make it easier, but they've sort of been falling out. Maybe a declarative syntax, or that would be awesome.
Totally.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Two questions. One is about installed apps refactoring. Will there be any work on it? Installed apps.
Yes. I would love.
I've actually become convinced that it's like the sinkhole that no one returns from, and that it'll
Determined to return from it.
So yeah, well, it'll happen if Adrian wants to do it.
Okay. And what about content types and fixtures?
Another problem.
Content type IDs.
Yeah, that's probably just a bug. No.
Is this the thing?
If Russ says it's hard to do,
then
then
it's refer to like foreign key things.
Yes, internal references.
Internal references within fixtures. Okay.
Yeah, the serialization format is a bit half-assed, as with most things that I write. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so this one's a little bit academic. I've been queuing. At the moment, middleware is applied globally across everything, which is really, really bad, because often there's a piece of middleware we want to play in one place. There is a middleware from decorator hack somewhere deep in Django.utils that nobody knows about, but that's still not particularly brilliant. At the same time, what is a Django site? A Django site is a thing that takes a request and returns a response. So why isn't a view function? I think Django's core thing should no longer be this monolithic thing that applies middleware and so on. It should just be another view. And that way you can compose a view out of middleware that dispatches through a URL conf to other views, and everything gets much, much, much cleaner.
This is, in the words of John Stewart, yeah, totally. Love it. Wow. Love it. And we talked about that on the
That's going to be an instant classic on YouTube. Does anyone know if it's possible to permalink into a particular moment in a YouTube video? Because I have a use case for this.
Yeah, we definitely need to do that.
I want to, if there's anyone in IRC right now with any of the guys in Sao Paulo, make sure if any of them want to ask a question, have them stick it in IRC and someone get in line so that we can answer any questions that they've got, assuming that they're still around.
One more thing that I forgot to say before. The giblets, I guess the guys yesterday were calling it. Remember? Did you guys see that thing?
What?
Is it Thanksgiving already?
I forget what the product was. The Review Board. Review Board
Oh, yeah.
had this feature with these add-ons, and they call them giblets. And one of them was with a D in the front. It's a great name. One of them was a decorator that would allow your Django site to have a web API. And so it would allow your site to be mashable and have web services you could publish out to people. And I thought, I've had to do that, hack it in by hand a lot. But it seemed like one of those things that really should be part of the core that, if you want to publish a site that has a front face and you want to, having a web API automatically, very easily to add that feature and would be just phenomenal.
Is that like the Turbo Gears thing where it would, in your view, you would return just the raw data, and then the decorator specifies whether it's rendered to a template?
I haven't looked at it yet, but when they were showing it and they described it, maybe they're still here, they could talk about it, but it would just seem like such a great thing to have, because if you want to have other people mash with your site or write, widgets to call into you, just great thing to have. Thanks.
Okay.
This is also one of these places like Schema Evolution, where there's a lot of useful and well done external stuff to do web APIs. It's actually not. It's quite a bit simpler than schema evolution to start, but it's probably as complicated to sort of do in a general manner that suits most people's needs. So I think this might be one of these places where we need to sit back for a bit and watch what comes out before we, I'm far from an expert on these sorts of things, and so we need to make sure that if we make a decision to put something in core, it needs to be the right decision.
I'd like to see more customizable form output, specifically HTML4 instead of XHTML. It seems
Yes.
a lot of forms store too much too much in strings.
So Simon had some template tags. Is he
So
back in
was
Pine?
was it Joseph who started that?
Or Joseph had some template tags.
I think the as.
I posted to the list.
Oh, he wanted to get he wanted someone else to write them. Yeah, no, I think in retrospect the as whatever functions were probably a mistake, and luckily one that is easy to fix with just a better API that we tell people to use instead.
I was interested in asking for a standardized way of using Svn Release Tags so that it's easy for me to track the 1.x branch. I don't know if there's already an easy way to do that, but it doesn't seem like there is. It just, if I look at the Svn repository, at least I couldn't really find. All I saw was /tag/notable moments /Django 1.0. But it seems to make sense to do like a FreeBSD style release_1, and that would just track the whole 1.0 branch if you wanted to, or you could track a 1.0 branch.
We'll have a 1.0.x branch shortly. It's just so that we'll have the bug fixes to 1.0 line and the 1.1 line going on simultaneously like that. We haven't done it yet because it's easier to sort of apply bug fixes right away to just a single place.
And I had one more, just an installer, because just from my standpoint of, I'm working in like a university setting, trying to get people to, even nowadays, there's people that aren't necessarily technical, but they're actually starting to get more technical, like fields in general getting more technical. Sort of, if I'm trying to get somebody on board just to build a small web app, the major stumbling point is installing Django, and it's just as soon as you launch the terminal, people just shy away from it. So if like there was like I don't want to say it too loud, but a WordPress style installer where you could basically just put in the database settings, and the rest of the settings would be behind a UI, like the installed app settings, and you could easily just install a couple apps and get a really basic site running in about 5 minutes. And then you could go ahead and code and show people how things work. It would just, that whole stumbling block of a beginner and getting people just to like start coding and playing around with Python would disappear.
This one comes from IRC, actually. I think it's Luciano, I think. Sorry if I got the name wrong, but he's basically asking, oh, great, now I don't remember. Somebody look at my screen and tell me what he asked. It's been so long, sorry. What? Yeah, basically wants the documentation to be broken down into smaller chunks, and I sort of agree with that as well. Like they're pretty long pages for a single section and stuff like that. If they were more probably chapter style, that might help. I know they are kind of, but it's only about 7 chapters. If there was more like 15, it might be a little more easier to digest.
I'm hoping that that this person in IRC has not seen the new documentation that was released with 1.0, because that's what we did, was to break it down into smaller chunks. But if the answer is that it should be even smaller chunks, then specific suggestions on which pieces are too long and need to be broken down.
He actually did have an example. It was something to do with the models, and I think he was talking about how, like, there was, at least in the slightly older documentation for 9.6, there was 2 chunks. There was the API and then just the model reference or whatever. And first of all, I think probably something like that could be split up a little more.
It is. It's that is now split into about 8 or 9 documents based on different. So there's something about the general topic of how to use query sets, and then there's a separate reference to all of the individual specifics, and there's a general introduction to managers and a reference to all the specifics, and so those sorts of things. But again, like, if there are places where things are, confusing because they're too much crammed into one file, improving documentation is huge for us. So tickets there tend to get fixed pretty quick because we take this really seriously.
Yeah, you might have just answered his question right there. So.
And one potential reason for that confusion might be that the new docs are at docs.djangoproject.com and the old ones were at djangoproject.com/documentation, and that hasn't been redirected yet. So in case any of you have bookmarked, you're still seeing the old stuff.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's localized or not yet, but I mean, obviously it's coming from a different country. So, I mean, is it only available in English right now, or is it available in other languages already for the new docs?
Like I said earlier, the translated documentation, unfortunately, right now is a wish, not a reality.
Oh, okay, yeah. All right, thank you.
I'd just like to encourage James to release the code for his book.
So this is one that comes up fairly often, I think, too.
Weren't you up here also already?
Yes,
Come on, man.
A switchable auth user class.
So let me give a history on that, a little history lesson. One of the things that Adrian didn't mention in his history lesson was this awesome thing called replaces module. And let me explain and let me explain how this worked. This was originally written in the case of the code generator, and it was actually ported to the metaclassing hacky system. So you've got this auth user app, and you decide you want your own user app. So you write your own user app, and you say replaces module auth.user, and Django would actually take your user class or your user module and overwrite the built-in user one with yours. And assuming you provided the same API, it would supposedly work in practice.
Not supposedly, it would work. I am proud of it.
In practice, this turns out to be a terrible idea. Did I come up with this?
I don't even remember.
All right.
And what were the problems with it?
It doesn't work.
It was way too magic.
You can't work. Well, and you can't. There's no way to get at the functionality of the underlying piece because you've completely overwritten it. Obviously if the public API of the underlying bit changes, you're SOL. But often even if the internal details of the underlying implementation changes, you get screwed as well. So, I mean, there's obviously we could do a pluggable user app differently than this, but I think I'm really wary of it because I think that's a really difficult. I think that's a very, very difficult thing to get right because there are certain assumptions that we have to let people make about what a user app means, and if we make too few assumptions, it's basically useless, and it's sort of this abstract interface that does no one any good. And if we make too many assumptions, like get full name, for example, we screw up internationalization. So we have to, if we figure out a way to do it, I'm wary of that. I mean, I agree that I think it's something that would be good to do, but I'm really wary of getting it wrong.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the next thing I was going to say. To take that further, I guess sort of like Adrian's idea. I mean, a lot of times you can't reuse other apps because you need to do something just a tad bit differently, and you end up having to basically, write your own common app because you needed to add a field that it's not there, and you can't just inherit it because, it's not an abstract base class or, something similar to that effect. It's a hard problem, though, yeah.
It's a common request, though, for, my users are different than your users.
So speaking of hard problems, Unicode, really fiddly, really difficult, so Django solves it, right? Geographic projections, really difficult, really fiddly, so GeoDjango solves it. What about time zones?
Ooh. This is one of these situations where we should have external dependencies because between dateutil and pytz, it is solved. We should definitely not reinvent that wheel. It's been invented and it works fine.
But we need to figure out how to get it working in the Django ORM.
Yeah, we need to
like
figure out
model support for time zones
Right.
that only works if you have.
It should
date
definitely,
util
yeah. I mean,
like
some
you
sort
said.
of like if you've got these modules installed. And by the way, if you don't have date util installed and maybe PyTZ, and you need to do anything at all with date times, you're just like you're a masochist. You need to be using these.